webinar in our series. So it's a very warm welcome from me, Thom Kiddle, Director of Nile, introducing the third in our series of webinars related to our project with British Council and the Ministry of Higher and Specialised Secondary Education on the EMI in Higher Education project, which we've been working on since 2019 with a number of partner universities across the country. And we're focusing today on a specific area of the project, which is a continuation of this series of dissemination webinars. Before I make a start and tell you a little bit about what we're going to focus on and introduce the panelists for this panel discussion, I'd like to invite Jamelia to say a few words on behalf of our partners, British Council.
Thank you very much, Thom, and hello everyone, and welcome to the third webinar around one of the important themes for education today, which is English for education systems. As you all know, big, large-scale reforms are taking place in Uzbekistan, and one of key priorities is education reform with the focus on quality, focus of relevance of education, and internationalization of standards. And this year in Uzbekistan is the year of opportunities for young people. And among these opportunities and among key skills that need to be developed is English and abilities to use English as a tool for different purposes. So, and one of the priorities also for universities to start teaching or delivering some of the programs in English. In addition, in Uzbekistan, there is one other priority, which is to develop transnational education, and English medium instruction is so important. So this project is really addressing lots of important agendas and objectives in education reform. And we are delighted to work with the Ministry of Higher and Secondary Specialized Education in Uzbekistan, with 16 universities that teach programs or modules or subjects in English. And we're delighted to have Nile, Norwich Institute for Language Education, as one of our key partners in English reform work here in Uzbekistan. And I think in this project, a holistic approach is taken, and the project is looking at all dimensions in education reform, including assessment. I also think that this project responds to all the challenges that COVID-19 presented and offers innovative responses and ways to teach, but also ways to assess. So I think this webinar is really, really important, and I look forward to taking part in it. And just to thank all partners for excellent collaboration on this project, and to wish this webinar success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamelia. As always, for Nile, it's been an absolute pleasure working with the team at British Council, and I think this is a really important project for our institution here in the UK, but also the institutions we're able to work with in Uzbekistan through this project. As I mentioned, there are 3 webinars in this series. This is the third of them. The first one can be accessed through the British Council Uzbekistan's YouTube channel, and the second webinar will also be available there, and information on that will be in the YouTube channel, but also on the British Council Uzbekistan Facebook page, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. A little bit about Nile. We've been working in Uzbekistan for many years now on a number of different projects, and this is part of the work we do around the world to work with teachers, teacher trainers, other education professionals, focusing on the teaching of English, but also the teaching of other subjects through English. And the increasing importance of English medium education as a broader concept, and English medium instruction, what happens in the classroom with the teachers and the learners, is very much one of our areas of interest and focus at the moment. And as a result of that, we've brought together some of the people who've been working on this specific course, both from the trainer perspective and from the participant perspective, to talk a little bit about two aspects of specialized training within the EMI competencies framework, and that's a focus on the use of digital technologies for flipped learning approaches to EMI instruction, and also the approaches towards assessment, which needs to combine that reference to language assessment alongside the content areas, the skills and the competencies, which are the focus of the faculty subjects delivering their programs through English. So I'd like to introduce our panelists today. Aziz is somebody who I was lucky enough to be invited to watch one of his classes in the early stages of the project at the University of World Economy and Diplomacy, delivering English medium programs in his university for the students there studying finance and economics and diplomacy, and a very active project participant. Thank you very much for joining us, Aziz. Umida, someone who we've worked with at Nile for many years, has been a very active participant in many Nile and British Council projects, and it's a pleasure to welcome her from her position in Tashkent State University of Law, where she's an English for specific purposes specialist. And one of the key aspects of this whole project was bringing together people from the faculty areas who are delivering their content subjects through English, and the English for specific purposes departments within those universities, to get a collegial approach to the delivery of English medium instruction, and the support networks that can be enabled and created and maintained through collaboration between those two areas of specialism within an institution. I'm delighted also to introduce Anna Whinnett. Anna is a Nile affiliate trainer. She's responsible for two of the modules in our master's program, the testing, evaluation and assessment module, and also the teaching English for academic purposes module, and works very closely with me on a number of different projects, and was the trainer for our specialized training sessions on assessment in EMI contexts that we ran as part of this project. Thank you for being here, Anna. And our fourth panelist, someone who has worked with Nile for many years, but also has a great deal of presence and high profile and expertise around the world through his work with his teacher training videos platform and courses and resources, which will be familiar to many of you. Really started the systematic look at the use of screencasting technology in language education, and extended that out to flipped learning approaches and blended learning and online learning, many of which he does with Nile around the world. And he has been the trainer on the specific courses for looking at how a flipped learning approach to English medium instruction can empower and facilitate and support the work that teachers do with their students through English in their specialist areas. And me, my background is in language assessment and also in technology in teaching and learning, and so I'm delighted to be able to chair the panel here today. Right, enough of our introductions. I will ask those of you who are not on the panel to turn off your videos, so that provides us a screen full of the panelists here, which would make it easier for us to see who's talking and when they're talking. So if I could ask you to turn off your video, apart from Umida, Russel, Aziz and Anna, and we will begin our discussion. Great. Okay, so we're going to focus in specifically on the area of flipped learning initially, and I'd like to start with a question to you, Russel, if I may. you've been working in your professional career with flipped and blended approaches in higher education institutions for many years, but we're in a very special and unique and unprecedented time in global the whole global setting, and particularly in the adaptation to the COVID-19 pandemic in educational institutions. Do you think the last 12 months has accelerated people's thinking and approaches and responses to using digital technologies in education?
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, lovely to be here, Tom. Thank you very much for inviting me along. Yeah, in response to your question, definitely. It's really been a sudden, massive interest in technology. I can give you an example. I think I had a video on using Zoom, which at the beginning of COVID, I think had been played about 1,000 times. And now I think it's been played 250,000 times. So that gives you a bit of an idea of just how much interest there's been in the use of technology. And obviously the flipped classroom kind of is very linked to the principles behind teaching online as well. I think one of the things that has happened though is that there's been a lot of interest in the technologies, and it was so much of a rush. I mean, I was doing consultancy work for organizations in in China, and then also an organization in Portugal, some work in Greece, all helping teach schools and organizations to get online and simply teach online. And the focus was on the technologies. There wasn't a lot of thought into the pedagogy. Because we were all in a rush just to literally switch the way that we were delivering. So what I'm hoping is now is that there might be a moment where, as we perhaps move back to a more blended form of delivery, which hopefully is going to happen over the next perhaps year, there'll be a little bit more time to focus on the technologies themselves and what they really contribute to teaching and learning. I think we need to focus a little bit more on the pedagogy. And I think it's when we familiarize ourselves with the technologies, the important technologies, but B, really begin to think about their impact on teaching and learning, that we begin to be a bit more creative. And that's what I'm hoping we're going to see emerging now. And I think to a degree we are seeing it already, but certainly at the beginning it was a massive focus on the technologies and not so much on the pedagogy.
Yeah, I think you and I and many of our participants here today will have seen that spread around the world, and you know, at the start, and understandably, it was an emergency response, wasn't it? Many institutions saying we have to move our physical bricks and mortar approach to teaching and learning online. In many cases, literally overnight, and there are casualties in that emergency response. And as you say, we're hopefully starting to see some consolidation and things that will maintain and we'll want to keep hold of when we are able to move back into face-to-face delivery. And I think part of that is going to be an increased awareness of what flipped approaches to learning can really bring to education generally, and specifically to English medium instruction. What is it about flipped learning that EMI teachers can benefit from and need to be aware of and can work with?
I mean, I think it's a really interesting question, and it's very interesting the way that the flipped classroom has emerged, because what it is about the flipped classroom is that it's a very simple way of thinking about blended learning, and it's that link. If there's one thing I would say, that the message from the flipped classroom is the link between what we do in the classroom and what we do outside of the classroom using platforms and online technologies, and linking them together to make the most of the classroom time, which is precious and very important. And we probably realize it more than ever now, how important it is to be in the classroom with our students, but also how to make the best use of both the classroom time and the time on the platform. And if we can build a link between the two, and it's that about the flipped classroom that's really, really important. Because I think what we tend to do with technology is that we kind of split it and we sort of think about our classroom as a lesson, and then the technology is an add-on. And really what we need to be doing is really thinking about how the the two parts linked together, how we can do things online in preparation for a lesson, so that when we come into the lesson, we can, rather than kind of necessarily delivering some teaching at the beginning of the lesson, we can get straight into doing group work and pair work based around the activities that the students have done for homework. So it's the link, and then that moves into a second point about why the flipped classroom is so important, is because I think it helps us to focus a little bit on the affordances both of the classroom, because I think we're more aware of that than ever now, the affordances of the classroom, the affordances of technology and to use them effectively, and the affordances of a teacher to really make use of the teacher's time. And if we're in the classroom and the students are working in groups and we're able to facilitate and support the group work activities and more focus on the students, I think that's making way better use of our time than if we're necessarily teaching. You've got to teach sometimes, so you definitely still got to do that, but maybe it just changes the balance a bit. And therefore the flipped classroom helps us to understand our role in the how our role in the classroom can change a little bit and focus more on facilitating group work and pair work. I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and that requires a level of confidence and expertise, technological competence, pedagogical confidence that this is a good thing to do in the first place, but then also the way to operationalize that.
Yeah.
Aziz, I know from your classes, personally having been in your classroom, that you very much believe in getting students to work together and to think in the classroom. How do you think flipped and blended approaches to teaching your subjects through English can benefit your students and you as a teacher?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. First of all, Thom, I'd like to thank you and the organizers for the fact that you gave me an opportunity to share my ideas, my experience, and so on and so forth. But when you were introducing me, there was information that I was delivering EMI programs in finance. It's a bit misinformation. It's not finance, it's international marketing, actually. Marketing and international marketing classes and so on and so forth. But I think it's okay, but I'd like to just clarify. Talking about flipped learning and blended learning, flipped classes and blended learning, I think even Russel told us from his own experience, or someone else, I don't remember, the origin was his own, I mean, the experience was his own or someone else's experience, but to a certain extent, teachers use this approach, blended approach, and flipped classes to a certain extent. They use it even if they do not know that it is called like flipped learning or blended approaches and so on and so forth. Because in our university, teachers tend to use the parts and components of flipped classes. They are using it already, even some of them, if they do not know that it is called flipped class. And about blended learning, again, referring to Russel's, what Russel told us about how it became how to say, a sudden case when we had to, because of pandemic, we had to change the way we taught and so on and so forth. And of course, in the beginning, it was really difficult, and we were more focused on the technology rather than how we teach, the way we teach, the pedagogy, and so on and so forth. But fortunately, in our university, University of World Economy and Diplomacy, we've been using Moodle platform for a couple of years. We started it earlier, and before pandemic, we already had an experience of blended learning anyway. But I think in the case of pandemic, our experience, I mean, we learned how to do this even more extensively, even more fruitfully. and the trainings, workshops you organize, I mean, Nile, jointly with British Council. I think the ideas and the methods as a recommendation that were given during these workshops, I think they helped. In the case of our university, for example, if I share my experience, I talk to the teachers a lot of so several many times when I talk to them, they again noted that they are using this from time to time, this kind of systems. I think the ideas that were given during the workshop will help us to systemize what we were doing so far, and the new ideas were given so that to make this process even more effective. For example, I already, from my own experience, I already started some techniques that was given by Russel during the workshops. For example, word wall technique, and students loved it. Students loved it, and I think these kind of things help to make your classes even more interesting. And for example, flipped learning, if we refer to again to flipped learning classes, according to the requirements of the Ministry of Higher Education of Uzbekistan today, we have to encourage our students to pay more attention on independent learning, independent studies. And I think flipped classes and blended learning approaches are a very, well, let's say, one of the most effective methods at doing this, how you try to encourage your students to focus on. It's not like the teacher said, the teacher gave some information and that's it. We are focusing on this information and so on and so forth. No, we're talking about here how in the case of flipped classes, we're talking about how students have to prepare for the classes before the class, to acquire some information earlier in advance. And I would like to tell about some ideas about how it should be assessed in the following sessions, I mean, in the following parts of our meeting today. But so far, I think I can say that, of course, when we are saying flipped learning and blended learning, we're not talking about something completely new. We were already using it, but maybe it's about how to make it more systemic, to make it more effective, new to enrich this process with new ideas, how to make it different approaches. For example, our teachers used to give as a pre-task for flipped classes, like articles in the area. But maybe it should be enriched with some videos from YouTube or some other sources, I don't know, not only the articles and so on and so forth, for example, right? So I think,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aziz. And I think you make some fascinating points there, and particularly about, I really like those ideas about it's not a complete change in your thinking. It's not something that takes you completely out of your comfort zone. It's realizing the things that you do as a teacher about bringing students awareness of a topic, an issue into their to the front of their focus in advance of a class, giving them activities to do that lead into what you can usefully do in the classroom. And it's maybe being adapting those techniques and embracing some of the technologies which support them, that go beyond, as you say, read an article in advance to dig deeper into that article. Think about how the vocabulary is used in that article. Think about the expressions which are going to be useful to you when you're actively discussing that. And also the kind of affordances of the e-learning platforms you mentioned that allow peer-to-peer collaboration in advance of a lesson, rather than just individual processing of content. And I think those all feed very well into a flipped approach. And you also make a fascinating point about the importance the growing importance of learner autonomy and being in control of your own access to information, your own resources that you're comfortable with, bringing in other sources of content, but also tools that you're familiar with that help you with your own learning to make yourself the center of learner-centered teaching. And that demands a certain capacity and competence in learner autonomy and the tools that go with it. And the flipped classroom approach really helps with that, because it validates and reinforces the idea of that. Umida, and the teachers that you work with, what do you think are the challenges for teachers dealing with a flipped approach, and how well have they, and can they continue to adapt to using flipped learning approaches in their classes?
Firstly, thank you so much for inviting me. As now we know that flipping allows increased class time for more engaging instruction, increased student engagement and focused classroom discussion are the very factors that helps to make the lesson really effective. But flipped classroom teaching has become a significant trend in education in recent years, but there still remains significant challenges in persuading some teachers to adopt this novel method. In previous last years, we were urged to reform our English curriculum exactly during last year's, such that the outcome of English education was to be communicative competence with an emphasis on production skills such as speaking rather than on comprehension skills. Since internationalization is one of the criteria for ranking higher educational institution, Tashkent State University of Law has chosen a policy reinforcing the use of English as a medium of interaction in almost all disciplines, I can say, within university, including administration, research, and education. And I wouldn't say that only pandemic made us to move like further, but English officialization in Uzbek higher education has directly affected education. And I can say mandated the language of instruction in classroom to shift from Uzbek to English. And many universities, Uzbek universities, have expanded English medium of instruction as TSUL has done. And 30% of all classes offered by TSUL in almost all areas of law have been offered in EMI since 2017. But, one positive aspect of EMI, I would say that it often serves as a cornerstone upon which campuses, universities become internationalized by attracting a large number of international students, as has done so. But as I said, like some significant challenges, I can say that teachers frequently encounter the problem of having too little allotted class time to complete required tasks. But thanks to developments in information and communication technology, they can use class time more efficiently by incorporating this novel technology-based method in their teaching. In particular, by making materials that would traditionally be delivered during a class lecture available for students to access online and utilizing the class time for more discussions and problem-solving activities. And this increasingly popular approach, flipped classroom, has gained the attention of education and policymakers in Uzbekistan. And the other challenge, I can say, that students' limited ability to access the technology required for successful flipped classroom teaching was found as a potential inhibiting factor. Some aided teachers expressed that not all of their students have the digital devices necessary, for instance, laptop, tablet, or a dependable network connection to view the course content outside the classroom. since we have students of, different social status, and they vary sometimes according their family's socioeconomic status. And because of some network problems, they didn't have some access to the access to content of the disciplines. But and one positive thing, that one of the students taking international arbitration, if I'm not mistaken, in which blended learning is adopted with online pre-class activities, commented on the use of learning materials available on the learning management system, and said that the assistant teacher for the professor was very helpful. He said that she always uploaded handouts to the system, to our Moodle platform that is launched by the Ministry of Higher Education, Higher and Specialized Education. And she's always ready to answer students' questions. And he thinks that it's a great plus in this class. And I collected some feedbacks. Let me find a second, please. Feedbacks that we had after having the one semester classroom. Students taking an EMI course hold a more positive view of English lectures than instructors do. At the beginning of 2020 academic year, we observed students who willingly decided to enroll in EMI courses, likely to face the most difficulty during first semester because they have yet to familiarize themselves with the delivery of lectures in English. However, after having completed their first semester, it has frequently been reported that students feel more confident as their grades are better than what they had originally expected. And this is not because their understanding of English lectures increased drastically in just one semester, but because they were exposed to various learning strategies within an accommodative setting to help them become more academically successful. And students' English language proficiency here also grew because of repeated exposures to English parlance. And some feedbacks of our students that I have collected here. Here, teaching of difficult topics should be done in this way, as it will make us understand the topics easier, and it is interactive method. This is the feedback about our students about flipped classroom. The other one, it helped us greatly in preparation for exams. More such class should be conducted in future, which could help us in many ways. The next one, it was interesting. I was able to interact with the facilitator, with the lecturer better, as I had gone through the topic prior to class, and it created an environment to share our understanding about the topic and allowed us to clarify the concepts. I like this type of class very much. Group activity was good as well. You see?
Fantastic.
Yeah, I was really myself happy to read such kind of, because as an ESP teacher, we have such kind of technological tools before, but EMI, this is a new, we have discovered a new world for Uzbekistan educational system. And if the materials posted before class, that gives the facilitator to concentrate on the critical part of the lecture, like application knowledge and problem solving skills during the class time, instead of lecturing, asking. It takes some time, but flipped learning, flipped approach helped us really a lot.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Umida. You make, again, some fascinating and really important points there. I really like your point about reinforcing the centrality of the teacher in the flipped approach in what happens outside the classroom as well. It's not an abdication of responsibility for the learning that happens. The teacher being there as a facilitator for the online, the pre-class activities and responsive to questions about them is really central to that being a successful approach as well. And also I really like the point about the support for EMI done well supports achievement among students. The principles of good pedagogical practice in EMI about supporting students' understanding of the content, about checking their understanding, about staging the lesson and providing scaffolding around the interaction with the content, about supporting students' output, about giving interactive tasks and using that classroom time effectively. Those are all good pedagogical practices, regardless of what language you're teaching in. And that underpinning of good pedagogical practice that comes through the EMI pedagogical competences, excuse me, we've developed as part of this project with you all, really reinforces the student learning experience. And it's not unique to EMI, but it's something that good EMI does and supports that learning experience. Russell, we have a question in the chat box directly to me, which we probably could have covered earlier on. Someone asking, what is the difference between flipped learning and blended learning? Is it something you could give a quick summary of, just for our audience here?
Yeah, I mean, the blended learning and flipped learning are the same thing. It's a blend. It's a combination of what you're going to do in the classroom and what you're going to do with the technology. But where the difference is the principles behind the flipped classroom that are applying to that type of blend is to try to do the lower order thinking skills, the preparatory work. I don't always like the term lower order thinking, but the lower order thinking, the preparatory work at home. Therefore, in the classroom, we're trying to do the higher order thinking skills. We're trying to do more group work, more task-based activities. It's simply a way of thinking about blended learning that is based on Bloom's taxonomy. So lower order thinking skills at home, kind of preparatory work for a particular activity, and then higher order thinking skills, using that knowledge, working with that knowledge, creating with that knowledge in the classroom. And that's where the role of the teacher comes as a facilitator and supporting those types of activities. But essentially they're the same thing. They're both forms of blended learning, but one's based predominantly on Bloom's taxonomy.
Great, thank you, Russell. So blended learning is kind of the umbrella term, and flipped learning is a specific approach to preparatory work within that. That's great. Thank you very much. And the reference to Bloom's there, for those of you who aren't familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, this is the categorization of the cognitive processes into lower order thinking skills of remembering and identifying information, and the higher order thinking skills, the use of that knowledge, the creative use and the systematic use of that synthesized knowledge in classroom settings. Thank you very much all. I'm conscious that we could talk about blended learning and flipped approaches, and certainly our audience are very interested in this for the whole session. But we have two areas of focus in this particular panel discussion. And so I'd like to bring in Anna now and to switch our focus a little bit away from the blended learning approaches towards the thorny issues surrounding assessment in EMI contexts. And Anna, your part of the project was working with our project participants from the different participating universities on features of assessment and supporting assessment approaches in English medium instruction context. What were the features of assessment you thought were particularly important to highlight with the teachers you worked with?
Okay, thank you. No, it's and hello everybody, and it's good to see actually quite a lot of familiar names in here, people who maybe took part in the course that I was working on as well. So it's interesting that some of those aspects that you've been talking about already actually fit in quite nicely with some of the things that we looked at on the assessment course as well. But specifically, we were looking at good practice in assessment, but also looking at contemporary assessment practice as well, and thinking about what we're doing when we assess, and why are we assessing certain things. So as an example of that, I mean, we can't get away, can we, from CEFR? You know, we often our students are often you know, come in or exit with certain CEFR levels. And so we talked about, or we explored what it means when a student is, we say that a student is at, or a course is at a certain CEFR level. And maybe for some of the English teachers who were on the programme, maybe that was more familiar, and perhaps for the content, the discipline, teachers. Maybe that was a little bit new, but I hope as well that we expanded it. So just beyond the headlines, and we looked into more detail about what it means. Interesting you mentioned Bloom as well, because that came into it, and I argued that there was, I think we can see a link between the thinking skills in Bloom and the kind of levels of language competence and performance described in the CEFR. So we looked at that in some detail. But so if we're thinking about assessment, we need to always ensure that our assessments are accessible to our students, and that might be about level, but it will also be related to the learning outcomes, or the learning outcomes of the course. And so we did quite a lot of work on matching learning outcomes with assessments, and how maybe in how we design our assessments. So thinking about the content of them, and therefore the meaning then of those assessments. You know, what are they? What are we testing? Why are we testing it? And we looked specifically at listening and reading. And I think sometimes when we're thinking about teaching and also testing listening and reading, often we think about comprehension. So, you know, maybe understanding specific words, but it's more than that, isn't it? And we explored, you know, other aspects that come into listening and reading, so other skills related to that. Alongside that as well, and you know, I'm aware of the time, and we can maybe talk about it a little bit more in a minute, but we did touch as well on the more contemporary practices of assessment in terms of what we might call alternative assessments, or more autonomous ways of looking at students assessing their own progress. So we looked at self-assessment as well. So there's some really clear links, I think. It's different, but there are some really clear links between doing things in good practice, but also moving with the times as well, and keeping up and sort of using these new options that we've got and making the most of them with our students, in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. That's a really good overview of some of the areas that you covered, and I think that this has been a challenge for teachers, because there's been so much of a responsibility placed on teachers to be present and to get the content there, that often the principled assessment practices take a back seat and you know, need to be worked on and remembered, and linking it to the learning outcomes, and really trying to think, what is it that I'm measuring when I set a task or set a test, are really crucial to help us, you know, develop the validity and the responsibility for good assessment alongside the responsibility for good teaching and learning. And that's a particular challenge in English medium instruction, because it involves the content and the language in an integrated way. But it also potentially means that there's more to the listening and the reading process than we might face in an ESB context, because it's about what we do with that knowledge, what we do with that information, how we transfer it into our output, or how we transfer it into the requirements of the task. And so there's many factors at play that, you know, you unpicked within the course. It's certainly a challenge for being assessment literate and confident as a teacher setting assessment tasks, and it's one that's perhaps undervalued in initial pre-service teacher training, the importance of assessment. For you, Aziz, what particular challenges do you face in your classes when you're working in an EMI program with your international marketing content, and then you're designing and delivering assessments based on that content through English? What are the challenges for you?
Thank you. Very good question. We, together with the ESP teachers in our university, we started writing an article on the challenges of EMI education, English as a medium of instruction courses, programs, and so on in Uzbekistan. And I was, I just learned some information dealing with different experiences in different countries in the world, dealing with EMI. And assessment aspect was one of the challenging and one of the debatable, can we say, aspects of EMI teaching, EMI education, and so on. And I thought that even if the medium of instruction is English, the English proficiency, I thought that English proficiency should not be included in the assessment criteria. And some people say that, I read some ideas that this also should be included in the assessment. And this is again debatable because I cannot agree on the fact that it is totally impossible doing it without this part, I mean the assessment. But on the other hand, I agree that some minimum requirement dealing with at least the use of the proper terminology, the use of academic English, the use of this kind of things should be considered in the assessment. But it doesn't say that, I don't mean here that, for example, in the assessment of EMI courses, the general knowledge of English or English proficiency should be the focus of the assessment. I think that the assessment should focus on the content, not on the language, because this is not the, from my point of view at least, to my mind, that it is not an English language class. And I think this is the difference between what we are doing it as a English and English as a medium of instruction in teaching content, not the language itself. That is why I think here we should understand the difference of how to take into consideration the language aspect in the assessment. And I read some articles.
Aziz, I think you've hit the mute button accidentally there.
I read some articles about even how in some countries, I think it was in China or something, even the teachers do not limit the use of the mother tongue or native language. They do not restrict at all in the EMI course. So it's again debatable, because I think that you should reach the level when students use English as a medium of instruction as much as possible. I think I don't know, maybe about 5% of the time should be about 5 to 7 minutes of your class out of 80 minutes can be left for the discussion in the mother tongue or first language of the students. But in the assessment, I think we should focus on the content, and this is again debatable.
Absolutely, this is, yeah, and you make some fascinating points again, and really underline the challenges. And I think one of the key things for me is that the way you've laid out the challenges reinforce that idea that this can't be individual teachers' decisions. We can't have completely different practices about the integration of content assessment and language proficiency on a teacher basis. It has to be something that's more systematized across ideally departments, because we know that there'll be different linguistic demands from kind of text-rich subjects like your law and history, and from more practical focused courses, or courses that are largely about statistics or numbers. And so we do have different needs in departments and so different language proficiency requirements. But I think you're absolutely right that content assessment has to be the focus. But that demands, if it's an English medium program, that demands a level of competence within English to verbalize or to express that understanding through English, and those decisions really need to be systematized, to use your phrase from earlier, and it's a massive challenge. Aziz, yeah.
Can I add something? Another point I'd like to note that about the assessment is that I know that we have some workshop dealing with creating rubrics, and I found it really useful for me personally, because to a certain extent I did. Assessment is really hard, you know, it's really complicated to find the best criteria, best solution for making the most fair, the most objective assessment. Yeah, it's really complicated. And the workshop dealing with creating rubrics, I love them because they help us, the teachers, for me personally, for example, to make my assessment criteria more systemic and I don't know, more comprehensive or something. And I think, yeah, I think this workshop was really useful for me. Yes,
Brilliant.
Dealing with the assessment, because creating rubrics is a part of assessment, actually.
Absolutely. And when we're doing this kind of subjective evaluation of quality of our students' output, then it's the rubric which we turn to, and a solid rubric really gives the teacher that support to make their subjective judgments as objective as possible. Umida, before I come to you, I just wanted to invite Russel to comment on one aspect that Anna introduced, which is the alternative forms of assessment becoming more and more relevant and applicable, particularly to the situation we're in. I know you do a lot of work with portfolio assessment and bringing this into it. Do you think this has a place in EMI context for assessment as well?
Absolutely, and particularly if you're thinking of applying a type of flipped classroom approach to teaching and learning, I think particularly. In fact, when I've been out in the States, because the flipped classroom is really quite a big movement in America, that is where a lot of the discussion is taking place at the moment, because what a lot of people are arguing is that if you begin to deliver in a kind of flipped mode, and we've talked about many of the benefits of that, including autonomy and the different, so you're in a way you're learning different skills, and if you're learning different skills, you need to assess those skills, and we've got to make sure that the assessment criteria, or the assessments that we set up, fit the skills that we're trying to develop in our students. And so for me, something like an e-portfolio, as an example, fits really well if you're kind of shift into a more flipped mode of delivery, a delivery that really encourages the students to become more independent in their learning. I think it's really important that we link the two together. And certainly in America at the moment, they're struggling with that. They have very traditional modes of assessment, even though they're encouraging their students and their teachers to use a form of delivery that perhaps begins to focus on different skills and encourage different skills to be developed in the students.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. Umida, from an English language specialist perspective, how do you think you can help your colleagues in your institution teaching their faculty subjects, their discipline areas through English with this thorny issue of quality assessment?
Thank you for the question, but let me share my idea about the challenges in assessment. One major challenge is that students are assessed through a language they are still learning, unfortunately, because not all of them proficient at English. Therefore, it's very likely that their performance will be affected by their English proficiency, and the assessment will fail to truly reflect their acquisition of academic knowledge. And even greater challenges lie in choosing the appropriate assessment methods for instructional objective and implementing it in accordance with the assessment purpose. We face such kind of challenges, such kind of, I can say, problems nowadays. For example, when the purpose of an assessment is for students to demonstrate their academic knowledge, effort should be devoted to ensuring that students are not penalized for their English abilities. I told about it, Jason, when we had our trainings with Jason. And on the other hand, if improvement in academic English abilities is also deemed important or at least relevant to the specific content course, EMI teachers should take the necessary measures to promote students' language learning. And as an ESP teacher, actually we work with our content teachers all the time in collaboration. For instance, we with Akmal Sadiqov, he is my content teacher in a project. He developed himself the case studies in 3 languages. And that is one method of assessing his students' knowledge. And all staff is using this very manual. And I helped him with like editing with some ideas. And Fakhreddin as well, we are 3 in team. And we always work in collaboration. We have many teachers, content teachers, who deliver their lectures, their seminars in English. And in this case, we have cascade training every month, 1 in a month, and we usually meet with them. We just discuss what problems we are facing and how the authority can help us, because in this process, the institutional support really matters. Because all the time supporting or providing with the necessary devices or even trainings, even time, it's also, everything is here dependent on our authority. And in such kind of trainings, we use variable format and dynamics within the lecture, how to promote the quality of lesson. And we had the participants of the training of all our faculties, like criminal law, international business, and civil law. And new technological educational technologies used for an effective teaching were shared with them. And we are going to have another training for our teachers after finishing this very trainings using the technological tools that Russel shared with us. It was really, I can say, brilliant. Many of them was like new for me, like a screen-o-matic, what will we used to use before, but like a Padleting, using the Padlet, and even making playlists on YouTube. How many times we use YouTube during our teaching process, but making playlists on YouTube to have a discernment how to choose, and like searching on YouTube, searching for images. He taught us everything, almost everything that will be very efficient during our flipped classroom and even blended learning as well. We focused on creating activities through simple quiz making tools, which can be very efficient in assessing. And the quizzes, many tools that offer many options and which are widely used by teachers to check the understanding of students. And
thank you, Umida. I think I was really great to hear how much you've taken out of these workshop sessions and these activities. Anna, do you think that the kind of collaboration between the ESP departments and the teachers working in through English medium instruction is one of the keys to solve or to overcome some of these challenges that we've all illustrated here?
Absolutely, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that as well, because it's something that I think is very important to highlight. Different teachers have different areas of expertise, and obviously you've got the same students, so you're trying to solve very similar challenges. And yeah, for sure, working together is one of the ways forward. Great,
thank you, Anna. I'm going to cut you off there because it's it's the end of our hour, and it's been a fascinating discussion for me, and we could have gone on. I wanted to give everyone a chance to express their thoughts here from the panelists, and I think we'll leave with Anna's words, because that idea of collaboration is exactly what we're encouraging here through the project and through the wider EMI projects with British Council and the Ministry. And this has been a great example of that, how it's been beneficial and how the reflective practice among colleagues is really moving things forward. I'd like to share just for one moment a couple of ideas before we move to the end to close, just to reinforce that on British Council Uzbekistan website there's more information about the project and about these dissemination webinars, and those will continue to be added, and including blog posts and reflections on the project. We'd also like to ask for your feedback on this seminar. I do apologize that we haven't had as the time I'd hoped for your questions, but hopefully you found the information that we've shared and the ideas expressed by the panelists useful and confirmatory in terms of your beliefs, or challenging and extending your ideas about the importance of English medium instruction. There's a QR code on the screen there, and the feedback form is in the chat box for everybody as well. So I do really appreciate your attendance here, and thank you for listening. And I really want to express a huge gratitude and for the particular content and ideas that have been shared by Umida and Aziz and Anna and Russell through the session. Really grateful for your contributions, and I hope this has been an interesting experience for everyone on the webinar. Thank you to you all. Thank you to British Council. Thank you to the participating universities. Thank you to the Ministry of Secondary Specialised Education. And this is all from us here in Norwich and in Tashkent and in London and in Wales today. And we'd like to ask you to contribute your feedback and stay tuned for more updates about the project. Thank you on the call.